everyone, Lisa here with you today on the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be creating a monochromatic card using this set here, which is called All My Love, and I'm going to share some tips and tricks on how to do pencil colouring and add drama to your card. So I'm going to start off by stamping the main image from the set, this beautiful floral stamp, and I'm going to stamp and heat emboss it. So I'm going to prepare my cardstock panel with an anti-static powder bag first. That just prevents any excess powder sticking to areas where I don't want it to go. I'm going to brush off the excess, and then I'm going to position the stamp down onto the card. Now, I've chosen to use a blue cardstock for this card because it is monochromatic and I want to do some blending. And to do that, it's much easier to start with a coloured cardstock rather than a white cardstock. It's just going to mean a lot less blending time for me, and I will use a lot less ink. So now that I've prepped the cardstock, I'm going to take my black pigment ink, and this is VersaFine Clair Nocturne, and I'm using a pigment ink because I want it to stay wet so that I can apply my embossing powder over the top. So just adding the ink to the stamp there and making sure that I press that down and get a really crisp impression. And although I got a really good impression with my first stamp, there was a tiny area in the centre that wasn't quite crisp enough. So I re-inked the stamp and pressed it down again. And I am going to leave my stamp in the MISTI because I will want to come back and re-stamp my panel later in the video. And as the ink is still wet, I can now apply my embossing powder over the top, making sure that I cover every little bit of that stamp. So I do apply it a couple of times and then I take it off screen and heat set it. Here's the image now that it's heat set, and we're going to start on the ink blending. I've got 3 inks here: Prize Ribbon Oxide, Chipped Sapphire Oxide and Black Soot Distress ink. So this is what's going to add that real touch of drama to the background of my flowers. So I'm going to start off with my lightest blue here, and this is Prize Ribbon, and I'm using a blending brush, and I'm going to start applying this all the way around the edge of the panel, going as near to the image as I can. It actually isn't going to matter if I overlap the image a little bit, if I get ink on the flower, because I'm going to be colouring in blue. You're not going to be able to see that ink once I've coloured it with pencils. So I've sped this up a little bit. It goes on really easily onto this cardstock, and you can see there already that you're starting to get that highlighted image in the center of your panel. So just going to clear off my desk here because I'm going to start with the chipped sapphire now, and I didn't want to bring any more of that blue back onto the panel. So just making sure that my brush has been cleaned off a little bit. And then I'm going to protect my surface just by using a little bit of memo tape, just so that I don't get my fingers on the part of the panel that I've already inked up. I don't want to end up with any kind of finger marks within that blending. So again, I'm going to apply the colour just to the outside of the panel, bringing it in towards the image, the floral image, but not coming quite as far as I did with the first colour, which was Prize Ribbon. So really starting to add and build up the colour now as we work our way around the panel. And I'm going to add a little bit more of the chipped sapphire around the outside just to make sure that I'm happy with how that's looking. And then I'll go back in now with the Prize Ribbon. So just cleaning my brush off a little bit, and I'm going to blend the chipped sapphire out again. As I mentioned before, doesn't matter that I'm overlapping the stamped image at all. And you can really see now that that is really starting to pop, and what gives it its final sort of bit of drama is by adding your black soot around the edges. So I've taken a smaller blending brush for this because I don't want it to go too far onto my panel. I really just want to concentrate it along those edges, and I do go over this quite a few times just to make sure that I'm really happy with how that's looking. This is a really good blend for a night sky as well, and one that I've used before, but it really does sort of draw your eye into that floral image in the center. And I think you can really see why it's great to start with a coloured cardstock when you're doing a really saturated background. If I had started on white card, this just would have taken ages for me to get this blend, and it certainly wouldn't have been as smooth as it is. It does actually look a little bit splotchy on screen. In real life it isn't. It actually just looks really beautiful as it fades towards that lighter blue in the center. So just going through the layers with the different colored blues, just to make sure that I'm happy with how that looks. And if only we could ink blend as quickly as that. And here is the finished panel. So we're now ready to start our pencil colouring. I have got a tin here of Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils. This is the 60 pencil box, and I'm going to select sort of 6 blues, the white, and then later on I also use the black. So just taking out the ones that I think are going to go really well with the cardstock that I have chosen. It has been a while since I've used my coloured pencils, and I am a little bit rusty, but there's no better way of getting better than to just get them out again. So I've got the white to the left there. These are the 3 that I'm going to use for my flowers, and I've selected a different 3 for the leaves, and all of the numbers and colours will be listed in the description below in case you want to know the exact pencils that I've used. I thought that first of all I would show you how I've done some of the petals on the flowers, and I do speed up the colouring a little bit as colouring pencils do take a really long time. I tend to work in layers, and that does mean that it takes me longer than it does when I use alcohol markers, for instance. So what I'm going to do on all of my petals, and I do it on all of the leaves as well, is I first put down a layer of white, and that just helps remind me that I need to leave an area free, which I guess is going to look a little bit like a highlight. And I colour with my dark to lightest, which is how I colour with alcohol markers. So I've added my darkest colour right down at the bottom of that first petal. I've gone in with my lighter or my medium blue, and then this is the lightest blue to finish it off, and this kind of looks like the highlight. And then I go in again and I repeat the process, and I do this for most of the petals, which is why it takes so long. Obviously on those really small areas you don't need to do that at all. You can just use one colour in many of them because they are so small. So I brush off any excess bit of pencil as well, just to make sure that I don't smudge that. And here I go in with the white again as the base for my second petal, brushing off the excess of the pencil. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here just so you can see closer up how this is starting to look. So using my darkest colour here around that edge, blending it out with the mid-tone, and then blending it out again with the lightest of the colours. Now, I'm definitely no expert with coloured pencils. I'm just sharing my tips here on what I find is easier for me. You may find it easier to not put the white down and just go straight in as if you were colouring an image as normal. But definitely for me, it does help me to kind of focus where I want my colours to go. And you can see there that I resharpened my pencils. I really try to make sure that they stay as sharp as possible while I'm doing the colouring, as I do think that really helps you to get into those small areas. And sometimes I tilt my pencil as well, so rather than holding it really upright, I drop it quite low, and I think that that often helps me to get a softer blend when I use them. Whilst I'm colouring some more of the petals and some of the leaves, I'm going to pop some music on and you can watch me colour. I haven't coloured the whole image on camera. That would really take a long time, but I will show you part of the process and I'll be back after the colouring. Okay, so here is my semi-finished panel of colouring. I say semi-finished, I've done all my blues on the petals and the leaves, but I'm now going to go in with a black pencil and really darken some of those areas where I've used the dark blue. And I guess it looks like I'm being quite random about where I apply the black. I am, in a way. I'm looking at the panel as a whole, just seeing where I think I really want to bring out the depth of colour, primarily at the base of the leaves and perhaps around the sides of some of the petals as they overlap their neighbour. So just really kind of glancing at the panel as a whole and then going in with the black pencil just to really deepen those shadows. And it does definitely help to add more dimension to your colouring, because this is a monochromatic card and there isn't any variety in the colours that I've used. They are all blues of a kind. I do think it helps to sort of differentiate them out a little bit. It's quite hard to really see the detail on camera, but in real life it makes a big difference adding that black, and it is quite hard to stop once you start. So what I'm going to do now is pop the panel back into the MISTI. As I mentioned earlier, I did say I was going to leave the stamp in the door, and the reason that I've done that is because I now want to re-stamp over that image. Because I've coloured it with pencil and a lot of white pencil, sometimes it mutes the outline of the image a bit, so I'm just preparing the panel again. I'm adding an anti-static powder bag over the top, and I'm going to stamp the image down and reheat emboss it, and it really does help to bring those lines back into focus. And as I mentioned before, the clear embossing powder over a black pigment ink does sort of give a very slight shine to the outline of the image, and of course it is a little bit raised as well, so it definitely adds more interest. Going in with my clear embossing powder now, and I have to say, when I first put this on, my heart nearly stopped because I thought that I hadn't lined up my panel properly. I perhaps hadn't put it in the MISTI properly, and that I was stamping the image slightly off the original, but actually once I heat set it, I realised it was okay, but it had taken me such a long time to colour it. I was a little bit worried. So that is how the panel is looking. It's quite hard to see when I tilt it that there is a little bit of shine to the stamp outline, and I'm just going to mount this now onto a top folding A2 note card that I created with a navy blue cardstock. And just making sure that it is all lined up properly, and I did put a MISTI on it just to make sure it was adhered down properly. So my sentiment is from the All My Love stamp set, and I white heat embossed that also onto some navy cardstock and added some foam tape onto the back. So just using my tweezers here to set that down, and then I grab a T-square ruler just to make sure that it's straight. It did look slightly off to my eye, and indeed it was, so I use that just to realign the sentiment. And just for a little bit of sparkle, I added a few gems around the sentiment. Mine are just navy blue gems from my stash, but I thought that the Blue Lagoon or the prismatic blue gems from Crafty Meraki would work really well on this card. So that brings us to the end. I hope that you've enjoyed watching, and I hope that maybe you will give this a try. Don't forget to give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will be back again next week with another card for you. I hope you have a great day. Bye for now.